All right. What is up, college football dog Vol Nation? How are we doing? It is 8:08 Eastern. The college football playoff rankings dropped about 35 minutes ago, and we are here today to talk about it. I am Jack Wright with the Players Lounge. I'm here with my co-host.
Oh, you're just leading it in. I didn't know if you were going to do the intro. No, that I'm Chase Thomas with Ball Sub, also of the Players Lounge.
Yeah. So there was some interesting things going on today on ESPN with the college football playoff rankings. There's a lot of new narratives to look at, a lot of potential college football playoff games that we're going to get into specifically with your Vols. Um, so let's just jump right into it. We can move from the top down because I feel like that's kind of where it gets more interesting as we move more towards 12. We saw the obvious come in 1, 2, 3, Oregon, Texas, Penn State. I don't think anybody really has any arguments with that in terms of where we're seated from last week. And then 4 and 5, Notre Dame, UGA, also pretty much exactly what we thought was going to happen. But in this 6 to 12 range is really where we get our interesting narratives, our interesting storylines. At 6, we had Ohio State come in just one spot ahead of the University of Tennessee. And I'll kind of let you lead the charge on this one of what your thoughts are, just because I know a lot of Tennessee fans are obviously going to be pretty upset, believing they should be above Ohio State as they just lost to 6-5 Michigan or 6-6 Michigan at home.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've talked about on my podcast and written about and talked with family and friends about it. It's kind of been this looming presence coming out of the Vanderbilt victory. Was that like it's great that Tennessee obviously clinched a college football playoff berth, but the way the chips fell, Tennessee really needed Notre Dame and or Penn State to go down as well, to really help their home playoff case. Because, like you said, like losing to a 6-6 Michigan team at home is an ugly loss, and the way they lost that game was pretty ugly, especially for that Ohio State offense. But I do think Ohio State as a whole, like it, I don't. I think it'd be disingenuous to say like, oh, Tennessee absolutely undoubtedly deserve to be a host team over Ohio State. I think it was pretty close. Like I think that's probably the worst part is you don't want to be in a position where it's really like a coin flip and you can really make a fair case for both Ohio State and Tennessee to be a host team. I think the more frustrating thing for me, and just looking at this from Tennessee's vantage point, is that Tennessee should be hosting, but it shouldn't come down to Ohio State. The problem to me is more that we have these 4 auto bids at the top, the 4 first round buys, where you're looking at Boise State, who, if they win and beat UNLV in the Mountain West title game, they're going to be the 4 seed now with these rankings. And there's no, like, you look at their strength of schedule, you look at what their body of work to this point. Yeah, they played Oregon close on the road, but there's no case that they should be hosting over Tennessee. Like that's more of the issue is just the way the playoff format is set up right now. Hurts a lot of these good power 2 teams like a Tennessee, like a Indiana, like a Penn State, teams who are kind of on that bubble of hosting versus having to go on the road. But this was the worst case scenario, I think, for Tennessee in that now you're on the side of the bracket, and we'll see how this goes because we don't know necessarily how it will go after the first round if Tennessee gets out of this one with Ohio State, because Penn State could beat Oregon this weekend, and then it might be Oregon at the 5, and Penn State goes to the 1 seed. Do they put Texas at the 1? Either way, Tennessee is still looking at a situation where they will have to go to Columbus and then play a neutral site game against probably one of Oregon, Penn State, Texas, or I guess maybe even Georgia. So, I mean, it's a playoff. You're going to have to beat some good teams if you want to run the gauntlet and win it all, but it's not advantageous. And when you look at it, and I think what adds insult to injury here is Alabama sneaks in at the 12 spot with 3 losses, or the 11 seed, and they're matched up right now with the bracket as of today at Notre Dame. And that's where I've said is where you want to be as a Tennessee fan right now is you want to be in the Notre Dame side. You want to get Notre Dame on the road. If there's one environment you're not really worried about going into for a playoff, like a road playoff game, it's Notre Dame. It's a place where Northern Illinois won not 2 months ago. So I think that's what is probably adds insult to injury for Vol fans is that they got the toughest first round draw on the road, and their rival that they beat is going to benefit from being that last team in potentially and getting a much better first round game where you're already seeing the line will be lower if Alabama ends up making it in because SMU beats Clemson. Alabama will have a much better shot of winning their first round game than Tennessee, who I think you're looking at probably being, by the time the game rolls around, being a double-digit road dog.
Yeah, and it's funny that you brought up Bama. That's exactly where I was going to go next. Like, if you look at the two paths for Tennessee and Alabama, the Tennessee obviously beating Alabama earlier in the season, it it's just a seeding problem, and it's just a college football playoff problem because you see Tennessee have a great season, beat Alabama outright, and end up, like you said, having to play Ohio State and then Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Georgia, one of theirs, where Bama, like you said, gets a Notre Dame crowd that's known to not be as hostile as any of these other home environments. And then they get to play, if the season fell as it fell right now, it would be SMU. And so it's just a really unfortunate fan for Tennessee. And I think we're going to see, I would guess that we're going to see talks of change of the playoff after this season's over. Obviously, there's I think it's a 2-year contract. And then after that, I feel like the group of 5 team, I don't think we'll be able to get that first round bye coming up after this. I feel like that just throws a wrench into things that is super unnecessary. But kind of going into the rankings a little more, one big storyline that I think could make things very interesting is if Clemson beats SMU. So if Clemson beats SMU, we're looking at Clemson currently right now sitting at 17 after their loss to South Carolina. SMU sits at number 8. If Clemson wins, obviously first round, at least in, who knows if they jump Arizona State if they won, because Arizona State came in at 15, which is also kind of, I thought they were going to be maybe a spot or two higher, but they came in at 15. If they win, they get their automatic bid. Does SMU stay? Does SMU stick as a 10-2 team or 11-2 team?
11-1.
11-1 with and then a loss in the conference championship becoming 11-2. Would they stick over a 3-loss Alabama? Can they punish them for losing the ACC championship? Like a lot of discussed, losing shouldn't hurt you as bad.
I don't think so. I think SMU will still get in. And it's funny, like if you look at S&P Plus, you look at any of the event metrics, like the numbers like SMU. I think SMU's a legitimately good team. I think they were more real than Miami. Miami now finishes the season with no ranked wins, and their defense was just playing with fire every week. That's not been SMU's MO since they made the quarterback change from Stone to Jennings. I mean, SMU's a pretty complete football team. It's just everything you look at with them. I think they're really good. I don't think they're going to lose to Clemson, but in this situation, if they do drop that game, I don't think you can free fall that much. And I think you're seeing, I think I saw coming out of it is like, you can't, teams that are not playing this weekend, there's like no path for them basically to move up and do anything. So my gut is this committee's not going to hurt these conference championship losers that much. Like I think if SMU goes down, if Penn State goes down, if Georgia goes down, I don't think you're going to see them a free fall because I think that's something that if you're a Tennessee fan, you're like, well, what if Georgia gets blasted or what if Penn State gets blasted? Is there a chance that they get to host in Georgia or Penn State? My gut is I just don't think the committee, and I think this is actually fair, is like I don't think you can really punish them for playing this extra game. And if they do get beat, that, hey, it's a 13th game, it's a different type of deal. I'm okay with that in the Power 2 conference championship game loser still being able to host because it's an extra game. It's harder on them. They get less time to recover, and then they play another playoff game in 2 weeks. So it's a little bit different circumstance in that way. But my gut is I think Alabama would be out. And because I also think Alabama's that close. Like I think you're still splitting hairs with Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. I think if you're a South Carolina fan, it's just brutal because you finished the season so strong. Like you always wonder if they don't call back the pass interference or I forgot what penalty it was on that pick 6 against LSU. And if whatever penalty that was, I can't remember off the top of my head what that was. Maybe was it pass interference? Was it chop block? I don't remember late in that game, but it ended up being the difference maker. And if you win that game and you're at 10-2, I think South Carolina is in that spot, but it's also like South Carolina lost to Ole Miss and Alabama. So it's just, I think they are playing really, really good football down the stretch, but the wins have to matter and those games have to matter. And I've said all year, I still think Ole Miss is like one of the two best teams in the SEC. They just did some really dumb things like lose to Kentucky at home, which you can't do, but they're the only team we've seen handle Georgia the way that they did at home. And their ceiling is, I still think, a national title team, but they're not going to get the opportunity because they didn't take care of business twice against lesser foes, against Florida and everything else. But I think to put a bow on it, SMU just feels like one of the 12 best teams in the playoff, and I think they're ranked in a way that I don't see them free falling out, because I also just think if they lose that game to Clemson, it's going to be a close game. And at that point, and again, that is also what kind of sucks, is Clemson could win this game after really not beating anybody, looking bad in a lot of big games, and getting a first round bye if they just take care of business on Saturday. It's just the first round bye stuff to me is the one that you've got to fix, because this is just it's just not the same when with what kind of schedules the SEC is playing in particular.
Yeah. So kind of playing into that scenario, because that's a scenario obviously plausible. We don't necessarily think is likely with SMU being as strong as they are and Clemson looking very beatable this season and have been beat. In that scenario where Clemson does beat SMU and Arizona State takes care of number 16 Iowa State, do you think there is a world where Clemson would jump Arizona State? Because it's like we said, it's the Power Five, top five conference winners. So does Clemson jump Arizona State and steal that first round bye, or do you think they would stick? They're 2 spots back right now, but they'd beat a top 10 opponent.
I think
So
they
do
would
you,
move up. I think they move. I think the ACC would move up. I think that's enough juice where beating a good team like SMU to that point, because they're right up there. I think it's a different kind of win than Arizona State beating Iowa State in the Big 12 title game and Boise State losing or something. Like I think they would move up in that circumstance, and I think the Big 12. I also just think it's kind of silly that we're still doing that with the Big 12 and Mountain West anyway. Is I think Arizona State and Iowa State the winner. If you're going to go down this road, at least go Power Four. Like it's Power Four only. Like I understand they have this language where it's like the highest ranked conference champions, but the schedule has to matter. And Boise State's strength of schedule, it just you're giving them an opportunity, you're putting them in there, but a first round bye is just that's too much. Like you like a second like going immediately to the second round as a Mountain West champ in this playoff format is just it's I mean I think it's kind of a joke. Like it's just it is what it
yeah.
is.
I mean, it's just frustrating for some of these teams who play so much harder like such difficult schedules, like SEC teams, Big Ten teams, even like a couple ACC teams here and there who schedule some good out of conference games. Like you play this schedule and you work really hard to win these games. Even if you lose a couple, you're still earning yourself a top 5, top 6 spot. Just to get taken by a team that's best game on paper is a loss to Oregon by 3.
Mm.
So it's just very frustrating as a general college football fan to look at and say this just isn't right. This doesn't seem fair, which is why I said I think in 2 years' time the playoff system is going to be different. At least I hope so. Um,
Well, we
it
just need to
should.
get to a point where it's like just do like top 16 just and seed them 1 through 16. Like just have your whole reasoning whatever, but then just scheme it up 1 through 16, best 16.
I mean, if you're a conference champion outside of the top 16, you probably shouldn't be in the playoff anyway.
Right.
Just
Because it's not
like
like Boise State can't win the playoff. Like they can't run the gauntlet. Like it, or Arizona State, Iowa State, I don't think they can win. I think it's going to be really, really hard for a non-power 2 team to ever win this kind of format with the amount of depth that will be necessary to run this kind of gauntlet. But yeah, it's crazy that we did all this playoff work and we're going into first year of the playoff and already we're looking at a crazy situation where Boise State gets a first round bye and a pretty enviable path over a lot of really good teams who are going to be behind them.
yeah, I mean, not this is no knock to either of these teams, but they get a first round bye. Not only that, but they also get either Arizona State or Penn State as it stands right now. And
Mm,
um, not a knock against Penn State, but Penn State is not one of my most feared teams in this playoff. And they would get them in the second round after they get to play Arizona, or in a crazy world, they get Arizona State.
yeah.
And it's just it's hard to imagine. I mean, they end up in a 4-team playoff after that in the semifinals, and it's hard to imagine a team like that making a 4-team playoff in years past.
Yeah.
Um, so a system, obviously, that we've had in the past being the BCS, a lot of people have claimed that they want it back, that they want to bring back some sort of math, some sort of statistical reasoning to seed these teams out so we don't get a conversation like Notre Dame being the 4 seed with a home loss to Northern Illinois. And what is your take on some sort of statistical math, statistical science to seed them out instead of a committee?
I mean, I think it should be both. Where I want transparency because I'm sure there's something in the committee. It's not like they're just going straight off vibes. Is my
Right.
guess. So I'm certain that they are familiar with S&P Plus. I'm certain that they are looking at their own analytical models and looking at their particular numbers, because we all have our favorite that we cherry pick. Like I really like points per drive, like BCF Toys. Shout out to that site. I love that one for how they rank and see teams with their FEI offense and FEI defense, and diving into that S&P Plus with Bill Connolly. That's obviously one of the best. Football Power Index, I'm sure, is a part of it. Like there's a lot of different analytical models that I think use already to try and rank these teams, and I'm sure that probably factors in. But I mean, we're not going back. It's like the whole lost Jack and Kate. We have to go back. I don't think we're going back. I think we're moving forward, and this is still a very much work in progress. And I think the hope was from fans was that we would feel closer to the end product, where it'd be like, oh, because I think you're still working towards an NFL playoff model and an NFL type system of kind of like having this weekly intrigue of like who's in, who's out model, but you're still going through growing pains. And I think that's the realization that a lot of college football fans are facing here in early December, is that there's still a lot of growing pains. This is not a perfect system. This is a system that has a lot of flaws, and there will continue to be flaws, because it's not like there's a lot of revisionist history, because the BCS has been so long that people were really like, there was a loud faction that did not like the BCS, that did not like the computers deciding who was going to be in. I mean, there were years with USC and Auburn got left out as an undefeated SEC champ. So that's happened. So it's not like the numbers are going back to BCS would solve these problems. There's going to be problems both ways. But I think one of the issues is just like, this is such an easy one to fix. Is just, you can say everyone gets in, you want to keep everybody happy in terms of like, hey, like you still have a seat at the table, but the seats have to be a little bit more. We have to even out how these are, or be honest. Just be honest about it. Like it's just, sorry, Mountain West champs can't be seated in the top 8 here. Like it just can't with their strength schedule. But you can be in. You can be in the tournament, but it's not the same. When Yale wins the tournament in the Ivy League in March Madness, we're not seeing Yale out here in a 3 or 4 seed and that kind of thing. Like it's just different, and you have to view them a bit differently. It doesn't mean they can't make a run. It doesn't mean Boise can't do all of those things, but I think we have to change the structure in terms of who gets ranked where, the first round bye structure, and how we have to have an honest conversation about what it is week in, week out for SEC and Big Ten teams and what it's like for everybody else. And until we get that, it's just going to be kind of a mess like this.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with leaving teams out and bringing teams in and bold moves here and there, but I feel like we need to hear it. We need to hear why. I want to know
Mm-hmm.
why you put this team here. Like last year would have been a great case to hear why Alabama was in over Florida State, why obviously Georgia ended up being 6, but why Georgia got left out as they only lost a 3-point game in the last game of the season. They ended up getting kicked out by 2. If you can explain to fans and the general population why, I feel like they take a lot of stress off of themselves and the criticism that they take. Just because a reason is better than nothing. Instead of going in silence and having the secrecy of, well, we just did it. You don't need to know why. We're the Almighty. Like we just chose it, and y'all have to just live with it. At least if we hear why, we can be like, okay, like I can hear where you're coming from, or no, I disagree, but at least we're getting something in return for the misery. that comes
I
with it.
think they'll still be mad either way. I think people will be mad at the why. People will be mad at the lack of transparency. People are just gonna be mad no matter what is um, my belief here, unfortunately. But because it's you're not gonna get a perfect answer, and there's always gonna be teams on the bubble. Like so there will be if you expand to 16, the 17th, 18th teams are gonna be like we should be like this is unavoidable with a playoff structure. Is that there are gonna be teams left out? There's gonna be imperfect structure because like what you want is the NFL model because they have the perfect playoff system. The problem is the NFL has 32 teams that all have a pretty even chance of winning a Super Bowl each and every year. If you start because like the rosters are so close, these are all every division, every conference. There's no inherent advantage. It's not that there's no like the AFC East is the Mountain West Conference in terms of strength and roster building and this, that, and the other. And that is something that's still just a problem for college football in the playoff format. It's just that like we're getting to the power two and the haves and the have nots, and it's the gap is increasing year over year, especially with NIL. But I just think that's what makes this so complicated in terms of like how many ACC teams do we put in? What do we do with Notre Dame, who's basically playing an ACC schedule and not playing a conference championship game, and they're not in a conference? What do we do with the bottom half of the Big Ten, which is not the same as the bottom half of the SEC, but the top half of the Big Ten can compete with the SEC? So I just think it's a more complicated system. Like, yeah, the playoffs sound great in a vacuum, but with where things are in terms of just where I mean, just look at the top recruiting rankings for the class of 2025 and look at it's the usual suspects. It was a lot like, oh, it's gonna create a lot more parity in terms of roster structure, this, that, and the other, but it's not really happened. Like Georgia right now that you're familiar with, they're number one in the 2025 recruiting rankings right now. I think I've seen that before. So I think that might continue to be a thing, and the haves continue to have, and the have-nots don't. But I think we're doing these last little bits of like trying to keep everybody happy, and it goes in the face of logic where we're like, okay, I get wanting to keep Mountain West members happy. I get wanting to keep ACC members somewhat happy, especially after what happened to Florida State last year. But we also have to honor conversations, and it's why like I respect the committee for dropping Miami out of it because they could have kept Miami in there and kept all the SEC teams out for that final spot. But they didn't, and I'm sure the reasoning, or a lot of it was, look, there's no way to explain no ranked wins and them playing with fire for 2 months now. And look, that's just it is what it is, and there's no case to put Miami above an Alabama, an Ole Miss, or a South Carolina. So I respect them for at least putting them behind Bama, but I don't know. I think that's it's just a mess, man, and I think it's just going to continue to be a mess.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously we still have another year of it after that, and after this, and I'm sure next year is going to cause just as much drama as it has this year. But you actually hit on something that I was going to bring up next, which was a lot of early comments. We're about an hour post final rankings drops. We're about an hour post drop, and a lot of comments that I've seen already are people complaining about the SEC bias and Alabama having 3 losses and being in over that 2-loss Miami team. But I think you hit it on the head there. Miami's been playing with fire for the last 2 months straight. Like,
Yeah.
realistically, probably should have lost that Virginia Tech game. Definitely should have lost that Cal game. And they've snuck out of both of those. Lost to Tech on the road, lost to Syracuse on the road this past week.
You're up 21-0 at Syracuse.
Yeah, there's no excuse for losing that game. Like
Yeah.
that is an absolute collapse, and that team does not belong in the playoffs. Like it's plain as that. And people will, instead of turning to that and saying Miami blew it, Miami had their foot in the door and they slammed it on themselves. Instead of looking at it like that, they're like, oh well, Alabama's the next team in, so it's SEC bias. Whereas if it was like if Arizona State was sitting at 11 and Miami fell just below them, it's like, oh yeah, Arizona State deserves it. They're 10-2, whatever. It's just because it's Alabama and they've had those 3 losses and they had the ugly one really recently that people are having a big problem with. I personally don't have a problem with Bama being 11. I think Bama's a top 12 team still. I think Bama is a very good football team. I don't think they've on a week-to-week basis showed it, but I think if you want to take the top 12 most likely teams to win a national championship, it's hard for you to explain to me and tell me that Alabama doesn't belong there. Obviously, the results on the field with the really, really ugly Oklahoma game Um, don't help, and the Vandy loss don't help. Um, but if you look at a team like that and you look at Jalen Milroe can win against any team at any time, in my opinion. Jalen Milroe is one of the most talented players in the country, and if you put him on any field against most teams in the country, he's going to be a difference maker. And if he's having a good day, which is most days, obviously he has his off days, but if he's having a good day, he can beat anybody in the country. And so I personally don't have a problem with Bama being in. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's to me, I mean, right now with how it's played out, it's either Bama or Miami. I don't think you can pull Ole Miss up above both of those teams personally, and you definitely can't pull South Carolina above those two teams because they lost to both of them. So you're choosing between two evils here with Miami and Alabama, and personally, there's no argument for me that Miami should be above Alabama.
Well, I think I kind of hit it. I mean, I would put Ole Miss over both of them. I mean, I still think Ole Miss is the second best team in the SEC this year. I think they have the best quarterback in the conference in Jackson Dart. I understand there's some ups and downs there, but their best is still, I think, the best in the conference outside of Texas. That defensive line's legit. They get after the quarterback. The way their style, when they're all healthy and they're all rolling, I think Ole Miss has the capability of winning 3 to 4 straight games down the stretch, and like that, they're legit. The explosive plays are there. Trey Harris, when he's there, he's been a chunk play guy all season long. But I think to your point, I look at Alabama where you're like, they're clearly one of the 12 best teams in the country. And I think if you look at how Alabama's lost these 3 games, and especially against when they got swept by the state of Tennessee this season, is that you look at those games and look at just what Jalen Milroe did on the ground. And it's night and day. Like, he had 20-something yards rushing total against Vanderbilt and Tennessee, and obviously was not able to do anything on the ground against Oklahoma 2 weeks ago. That's it. Like, when he is able to run the way he did against Georgia, and he is able to against LSU, and is really able to dominate the game in that fashion, Alabama can beat anybody. So I think they just have a very high ceiling where I think they can win a national championship. It wouldn't surprise me. It also wouldn't surprise me to see them get blasted by the first team they play, because when Jalen Milroe is not able to run the football, this is a completely different team. Like, this is a team, he makes mistakes, they get into trouble. It feels like everything's really difficult. I mean, the second half against Tennessee was rough for Jalen Milroe, and I think they're still just the most complete team who will not be in is Ole Miss. But again, like, I'm not gonna like throw a pity party for them. Like, you lost Kentucky at home, like a terrible Kentucky team. Like, you win that game. I mean, look at Miami. Like, if you play Miami, Florida now in the Swamp, what does that game look like? I think Florida wins that game now. Florida is a much different team, especially with DJ Lagway, than who they were 2 months ago. So there's a whole lot more juice at Florida than when Miami came to town at the beginning of the season. So when we're talking about like the South Carolina surge, what does Miami look like if they come to Gainesville in November, December versus playing them in September? So I just look at it. I think it's fine. Like, if you want to tell me that Bama is that team, I'm okay with it. If you want to tell me it's Ole Miss, I'm okay with it. If it's South Carolina, I'm okay with it, because they all have 3 losses, and you can't complain. Like, you have 3 losses. That's part of the deal. So if two of you get left out here, hey, win one of those games that you should have won. For South Carolina, that was LSU. For Alabama, it was Vanderbilt. This Vanderbilt team, you should have beaten Vanderbilt on the road. And if you're Ole Miss, you beat Kentucky at home. You don't have to worry about any of this. So you had all of it in front of you. You dropped more games than you should have, and this is unfortunately the fallout from it.
Yeah, I agree with your Ole Miss take in that I think specifically on the defensive line, they're the most. I think they have the best defensive line in college football right now in the nation.
It's either them or South Carolina in the SEC for sure.
And I mean, they just have so much talent. Obviously, Portal King owned the defensive line portal this offseason, and he did some great things. But it's exactly what you said. You can't lose to Kentucky. You just can't. That's not a good football team. Like,
at home,
at home, you can't, and you just can't lose that game. You can't have the blemishes that you have and say we still deserve to be in over teams with significantly less blemishes.
But you also look at it, you're like, we crushed Georgia. We haven't seen Georgia look like that under Kirby Smart in a long time. Like, I mean, you demoralized Georgia in a way that no one else has. Like, it's been the most dominant program in the last 4 years, and you made them look like they did not belong in the field with you, and you're not going to be in the 12-team playoff. That's crazy to me, but that's what you did.
Yeah, and as a Georgia fan, specifically about that game, like I haven't felt that way during the game. Like that was a game where it was like I feel hopeless. Like I didn't.
Yeah.
I felt like exactly like you said, demoralized. I felt crushed. Like it was nothing like I've seen. It felt the closest thing that I can relate in recent memory to that game was the SEC championship against LSU in 2019. Was the most recent time I felt like that level of crushing. Like most of our games have been close here and there. Like even the Alabama SEC championship in 21, I was like, I didn't feel terrible, but that game, I felt like there was not a single thing that we could do positively on offense or defense that was going to influence the game. I felt like they had our number for every snap, and there was nothing we could do. And it kind of goes into a point of something I've said recently about Georgia specifically and about our inability to play mobile quarterbacks. And we obviously struggled with Milrow. We struggled with Dart, who's a more mobile quarterback than a lot of people give him credit for. And we struggled with Mississippi State's quarterback. Their young quarterback is
Van
pretty
Buren.
mobile. Yep. And we that game looked ugly. And for
Also,
a
you're
lot of
forgetting the big one here that happened this past weekend. He ran for
oh
like a
yeah,
gazillion yards. He carried the ball almost 30 times. Yeah, Haynes King.
and I think something that Georgia's missing right now is in the past 8 years, honestly, we've always, and this is just a personal opinion, we've always had a fast, very fast sideline to sideline, smart middle linebacker. We had
Mhm.
Roquan, then we had Monty Rice, we had Tay Crowder, who was quick, we had, and then we had N'Kobe, who was
Mhm.
sideline to sideline, super intelligent. And right now we have good linebackers, but I don't feel like we have that sideline to sideline guy that I can trust to spy a guy like Milrow or spy a guy like Haynes King. And we don't have that right now, which is something that I was a bit concerned with. If we had to go play A&M and play Marcel Reed,
Mhm.
that was on my radar. And as a fan, it's
I think that's why we're going to see Arch Manning a lot on Saturday, by the way.
I agree. I think we're going to see a good bit of Arch Manning, more than we've seen him play in the games where Ewers has been healthy.
Mhm.
It's very frustrating from a Georgia fan's perspective to watch us go from these incredible fast sideline to sideline, super intelligent linebackers to see our super talented linebackers that are just a step too slow to spy on some of these guys. And these quarterbacks are now becoming the college football quarterback. Like that is what it's moving towards, these guys who can beat you with their legs and they are effective with their arms. And so right now we don't have an answer to that as of right now. And so when we look towards the playoff, it's going to be matchup based whether or not we can stop some of these offenses. Personally, outside of Alabama, as it sits right now, I don't know if there's a quarterback that I'm scared of their legs besides Milrow. I mean, you got the most mobile quarterbacks is maybe Dylan Gabriel outside of that. Like Riley Leonard's mobile-ish. Like he can beat you with his legs, but it's not really the biggest threat.
Yeah.
Um, I
I mean,
mean,
they're really. I mean, I think Jennings at SMU is
yeah,
legitimately good with his legs, but I also, if you're a Georgia fan, you're not worried about SMU as a whole. But I think it speaks to a broader point here, which is something that I've talked about. So there's one team right now who, in the Power Two, in the CFP here, who has an underclassman quarterback now who will be in the playoff. It's Tennessee.
yep.
Everybody else is upperclassmen. Like you look across college football right now, the teams who are succeeding the most this season, especially in the Power Two, have been veteran quarterbacks, upperclassmen. You look at Quinn Ewers Jr., you look at Carson Beck Sr., Jalen Milrow Sr., you look at Jackson Dart Sr., right there at the border, and Nico being a redshirt freshman, he's kind of in uncharted waters here, going 10-2, his first season, and he's playing his best ball down the stretch. Like I think right now he's playing a lot better ball than Will Howard to this point. And I mean, I think the hype was just so high at the first part of the year that the growing pains kind of changed that a little bit. But Nico had a really, really strong 4 quarters of action against Vanderbilt, and he's the last 20 quarters as a whole, dating back to the second half against Alabama, have been really, really good for Nico. And I look at that and like one of the things that surprised me about Tennessee, I mean, he ran the ball a lot against Georgia, but it wasn't as many design runs as I thought Tennessee was going to have him run against. But part of that was just, they like the injury stuff coming into the game, and like you were kind of wondering what that was going to look like and how they're going to use him. But I do wonder if Georgia got matched up with Tennessee in the second round in this instance on a neutral site. I do wonder if we see a lot more Nico using his legs, because he was using his legs significantly more than I thought he was going to against Vanderbilt. And when he has that dimension, you see it. Like, you can see what makes him a 5-star recruit and what makes him a potentially really special quarterback at Tennessee is that he's got the arm talent, obviously, but to get this hyper offense to where it can run the table, he has to take off like Hendon did, because that was one of Hendon's best strengths. Is Hendon was super super smart at reading the defense, but also just knowing when to take off and like when to say screw it, like I need to go get 7 yards. And that is where Nico is starting to get to, and he showed that in a big way against Vanderbilt. So when we're talking about mobile quarterback in the CFP that could give Georgia problems, I understand Nico struggled at times, but it was also receivers weren't running open. Against Georgia, there wasn't really a whole lot for him to do. The tight end was the leading receiver for Tennessee in that game. But I think if they got matched up again in a second round game, I think Nico would run a lot more against this Georgia team than you saw the first instance.
Yeah, I mean, especially just with the health concerns no longer being a problem. I think that was definitely a hindrance to Tennessee's game plan against Georgia. Is that they just didn't know if he was going to be able to be as effective as he can be. But I think that storyline in particular, the mobile quarterbacks and the younger mobile quarterbacks specifically, is a story to watch for the SEC next year and the year following specifically. If you look around the SEC East in particular, you see these young quarterbacks who are real dual threats. You see, by real dual threats, I mean are effective, not necessarily run first. But like Lenore Sellers, you see DJ Lagway, you see Nico, not necessarily a freshman or sophomore, but Gunnar Stockton, who's next up at UGA as of now, is also a dual threat guy. The not in the East, but the kid Van Buren at Mississippi State, like Arch sitting at Texas, like Marcel Reed at A&M. There's a lot of
Deuce Knight might start right away at Auburn. Dual threat guy.
And so if you're Georgia or any SEC defensive coordinator, this is something that you need to start prepping for now, is that the SEC is moving towards now majority dual threat quarterbacks, whereas I feel like it wasn't that way. It was for a little bit, and then it wasn't that way for a while. We had a bunch of pocket passers. But it's something that is going to be a major storyline specifically for Georgia, not to go back to them too many times, but specifically for Georgia, finding somebody who can step into that role that's going to be a fast middle linebacker that can track down quarterbacks and spy effectively. It's definitely going to be a storyline going forward. And I think next year, specifically in the year after, Georgia's rivals schedule is going to get very interesting.
Well, I also am curious because I think part of the reason that this is more open is, like, you've seen this, I mean, with Georgia fans and how the up and down nature of how they've been about Carson Beck all year. Look around the conference. Like, how many Texas fans feel great about where Quinn Ewers is at right now? How many Oregon fans are in love with the Dylan Gabriel experience? Like, I mean, they almost dropped the game to Idaho early on. They were in a dogfight against Boise. He really struggled out of the gate. Will Howard, obviously not playing his best football. Drew Aller has been super up and down at Penn State. I think one of the biggest reasons that there's so much parity is, like, what CFP contender right now feels great about their quarterback spot. Like, I think Tennessee fans feel really good about Nico right now, but I think Georgia fans feel pretty good about Carson Beck over the last month. He's turned the corner, but you look around the conference, right, or look around the CFP, you're like, man, it's been a lot of just up and down quarterback play. More so it feels like than we've seen in recent years, where it doesn't feel like there's a lot of just Heisman. There's a reason that quarterback's not going to the Heisman this year, and it's a Heisman-driven award. Is because Shedeur, I think, has been the best quarterback in the country this season, and his team's not going to be in the CFP.
Yeah, I really think the only unblemished quarterbacks in the CFP this year, if there's more than one, is Curtis Rourke at Indiana.
Yeah.
I think he is the most unblemished quarterback in the college football playoff this year, and I think he has the most confidence behind from his fan base that he's going to lead the team to success, specifically at the quarterback position. So that's definitely a story to watch where everybody's kind of like quarterback position.
I just think you're like, we'll see. It's a week to week thing, because the highs, like the highs of Ewers and Beck and Nico and Aller and Gabriel are very high. But it's just been, I think, it's been a lot more up and down and week to week than we've been used to.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think I don't want to hold you too long. I know Tennessee basketball is playing Syracuse right now, right? I think
Yes, they are.
How's that game going? I haven't been able
I
to
have it
check.
taped. I'm in this conversation, man. You've got my
Love it.
attention right now. I am jumping back into it after we get out of here.
Love that. Well, I don't want to keep you too long from Vol hoops. Hopefully they're winning right now and taking off another orange team. But I really appreciate you coming on and talking for the last 40 minutes or so. And hopefully we see some very interesting stuff this weekend in Conference Championship Saturday.
Absolutely. It'll be a fun weekend. Go check out Balls Hub for all the Tennessee fans watching here. Go check us out and all the different articles that we've got there and all of our different athlete shows on the site as well. So all kinds of good stuff for Tennessee fans, and also over there on the Players On for Georgia shows with Malachi and company. So yeah, we have all kinds of great content getting you ready for this conference championship weekend.
Yeah, we have a Malachi Miles show we just posted today, and tomorrow we have a show with Terrell Foster, or I think Thursday, Terrell Foster, Jacob Hardy, and myself talking about the Tech game and some potential college football playoff and some flag planting and fighting information, which is always a hot topic now. So
Yeah.
stay tuned for that. Go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, go absolutely. There was a lot of flag planting drama this weekend,
Sure
and then
will.
clean old fashioned. Hey, you have this long embrace, very different than what we saw on Saturday. That was not a precursor for what was to come.
Definitely not. But I'm here for it. I'm here for the drama, here for the entertainment. But yeah, we really appreciate y'all tuning in and watching. I will be back on Sunday night on Selection Sunday doing some more instant reaction stuff. Maybe Chase will be here, maybe he won't. We'll find out in the coming days. We shall see. But yeah, we appreciate y'all watching, and go Dogs, go Vols.
There you go.